Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with co-hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Each week, we take an authentic dive into how mindfulness continually impacts our lives, deepens our relationships, and allows us to be emotionally alive. We filter all of our conversations through the man box, where we unpack how as men we are expected to act in society, how fighting the authentic human experience is exhausting and damaging, and how mindfulness can help. Now, on to the show. All right, we are live. What's up, everybody? It's Will Schneider here with my brother from another mother, John McCaskill. Welcome back to Men Talking Mindfulness. We are excited for today's discussion and recap episode from episode 10, where we brought in Ed Adams and Edward Fronheim, and we discussed their book, Not Liberating Masculinity. I'm getting nervous today, John. I don't know why. Where we talked about reinventing masculinity, and we began to break down confined masculinity, what it is, liberating masculinity, what it is, and how they differ, and what we can do about, and how we can implement them in our lives. So today we're going to recap, go through some of the comments, talk about a lot of those comments, and address them. And we actually invite you, anybody that's listening live now, please share your comments with the show. We'd love to hear, your thoughts, and maybe you had a moment this past week to reflect back on the discussion, or maybe you listened to it, and now you're joining us live today. So please, this is a growing discussion. This is growing ideas that we're bringing into Men Talking Mindfulness. We really love your participation because you keep the show alive and fresh. And and this is really in service to you. And John and I love doing it. So just a quick, we have a sponsor for our show. It's Naked Warrior Recovery Supplements. This is Naked Warrior Recovery is a service-disabled, veteran-owned and operated supplement company owned by a Navy SEAL. These supplements range from super greens for energy and recovery to broad-spectrum CBD products to immune defense products as well. So John's going to throw that the link into the live feed here, that you can pick it up. If you use code MTM 2021. That's MTM 2021. You get 20% off of any product you buy from Naked Warrior Recovery. So John, I kick it over to you. Good to see you today. Thanks for being here, and let's kick off the show.
Yeah, man. Well, you too. Good to see you too. Definitely, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here so you can see our faces, or at least Will's pretty face. So yeah, great to be here with you. Had a great conversation last week with Ed, and look forward to both recapping that and also going a little bit deeper than we were able to go last week. Had such a great conversation, but only an hour was not long enough to really dig into this book. So again, for those tuning in, Reinventing Masculinity, The Liberating Power of Compassion and Connection by Ed Adams and Ed Frauenheim. And the way that we normally kick these shows off, if you're tuning in for the first time, is either Will or myself will lead a grounding practice and at the beginning of the show, then we'll do a kind of grounding practice at the end of the show. And we also touch on the mindful moments for the week. So I'll kick off the grounding practice for this week. If you're comfortable while you're watching or listening, hopefully you don't do this in your car while you're listening.
Yeah, don't close your eyes and drive your eyes closed.
But maybe just tune into my voice, and try to relax. So we're just going to do some simple box breathing today. Nothing super complex, just nice box breathing. What we'll do is get into a comfortable position. If you're able to, get into a seated position, back straight but not stiff, and feet grounded on the floor, hands on your lap. I like to do them open with my palm up in my lap. And then I close my eyes. If you're not comfortable doing so, just lower your eyelids or look somewhere between 5 to 8 feet on the ground in front of you. And then just bring your attention very intentionally to the physical sensation of breathing, what that actually feels like. And we'll start by breathing out all our air. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4, bringing your navel to your spine, breathing all that out. Hold for 4. In for 4, last one. Hold for 4. And out for 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold. And now just breathe naturally. Again, paying attention to the physical sensation of breathing, noticing where the air is entering your body as you breathe in, and where it is leaving your body as you breathe out. Then we'll begin to come out of the practice, slowly bringing your attention to your full body, and then slowly opening your eyes or refocusing your gaze and bringing your attention back into the full space where we are, where you are, everything surrounding you. And that's, again, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, very simple practice called box breathing. You can do that anytime, just about anywhere, and that can really help to calm you down. Will, you seemed a little amped up. Normally it's me that seems a little amped up at the beginning of the show. Hopefully,
Thanks for noticing, John. Now I'm more embarrassed. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, man, you're good. You're good. Well, cool. Well, let's talk about mindful moments for this week. I'll turn it over to you, man. How was your week? What was an experience for you that you'd like to share, that you feel comfortable sharing with the group? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks. I have two actually. I'm really mindful of the days getting longer and there's more sunshine in my life.
Yes.
I know it doesn't sound like it's much, but I'm in the Northeast. I'm in New York City. The winter can be long, especially with quarantine. Like, I really didn't go anywhere. I just stayed home. I walked around my block like once a day, So that's exciting. And plus it's this Sunday is daylight savings time. So we actually gain an hour. Like amazing. Yeah. And I'm really proud of my nephew. He's 20 years old. He's a Marine. He's stationed in San Diego. He's going on his first deployment, John. He's going to Japan. First time he's leaving the country at 20 years old. So, I mean, a big shout out to my wonderful, loving, incredible young man person, Andrew William Schneider. So just a big shout out to my nephew. I'm really proud that he's a Marine. I love that he's a Marine, and he's also going overseas. So, and I just love the kid so much. I just want to, I'm very mindful of him taking another step in his life. So that's really beautiful today.
Nice, man. Well, my mindful moment, normally they center around my family. And I had several this week around my family, but I want to change it up a little bit. You and I, Will, earlier this week, we were talking about Wim Hof and Wim Hof breathing. And I've got, some friends who are big Wim Hof fans. And yesterday it was, I don't know, 20 something degrees outside. And I was about to take my kids to school, and I ran out to turn the car on because we don't have any remote start cars. So I ran out to turn the car on, and I ran out in my t-shirt and my shorts to start the car. And I was like, holy shit, it's cold. And then I was like, hey, you know what? Just bring my attention to my breath as I was running out there. And I focused on nothing else but my breathing, literally in and out, just taking nice, slow, long, intentional breaths. And it was pretty amazing to watch how that changed how I perceived the cold. And
Wow.
normally I would have
Yeah.
sprinted back from the cars back into inside, but what I did is I intentionally walked very slowly, and
Yes.
I forgot to add that I was barefoot, which was probably stupid, but I was barefoot, and
It
I was like,
toughens you
okay,
up, John. It really does. It
it
toughens you
does
up.
toughens you up, which is what we're here to talk about, how to
Yeah,
toughen ourselves
exactly.
up. So anyway, that was my kind of different mindful moment for the week, rather than continually talking about my family, although it kind of had to do with my family. It wasn't exactly related. So that was my mindful moment for the week, man.
Yes.
So getting into the show here, what we talked about again last week was this book, Reinventing Masculinity, with Ed Frauenheim and Ed Adams. And what I want to do, kicking the show off this week, is redefining the terms that they used in the book: confined masculinity and liberating masculinity. And they were very explicit about their not using the term toxic masculinity. They only used it once in the book, and it was really to talk about the term more so than toxic masculinity itself. And I believe most people appreciated the new term, confined masculinity, than liberating masculinity. And one of our guests actually used another one. I'm scrolling through our notes here. What was the term? Partial masculinity. Yeah, partial masculinity. Right. Great term. I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
But just to redefine how they use these terms, confined masculinity, reading from the book, page 2, it says, confined masculinity refers to a set of attitudes, values, and behaviors that define how men should show up in the world. It is a constrained conception of masculinity, one in which men tend to define themselves as playing just a few dominant roles. That's key, just a few dominant roles.
Yeah.
The protector, the provider, and the conqueror. The confined nature of masculinity also applies to how, where, and for whom they play these roles. Confined men almost exclusively see themselves as being in competition with others. They believe they need to demonstrate physical courage and project confidence. And I say project confidence because right after that it says project confidence, however false. So a lot of the time that false confidence that we're projecting, or rather that confidence that we're projecting, is false. And Will and I talk about false bravado quite often.
Yeah.
Continuing reading, they also concentrate attention on exterior markers such as physical strength, financial success, and social status. Less attention is paid to interior matters like emotion and spirit. As for the whom portion of this, confined men tend to restrict their efforts as protectors, providers, and conquerors to serve a relatively tight circle: themselves, their immediate families, and a limited number of others, which I thought was pretty powerful. I went back and reread that again and highlighted some of the key terms in there. I mean, that really does show you how, as the traditional man, we are confined, and that's the partial. Right. I like that partial masculinity that we had before. That's a great one. But then the next term, liberating masculinity.
Well, John, let me just say, like, I think it's interesting in that definition, like, how they use the word restrict, tight, few, false bravado, dominant, like, I think it's just really interesting that, the language around that it's all, I mean, I feel just hearing that definition, I feel like I'm in some sort of straitjacket.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
I'm like, I'm literally confined, and just like, I only have a limited way of a few limited options of how I should be as a person. So thanks for reading that. That's great.
Right. Yeah. I'm only looking away from the screen here because I try to bring up the LinkedIn live feed.
I got it here
on my computer, and I've only got it here on my phone. So anyhow, so going back to liberating masculinity, let's see, page 7 in the book. Okay. Thankfully, such a manhood is emerging on the opposite end of the spectrum from confined masculinity is what we call liberating masculinity. I'm going to skip down and then I'll come back up to that rest of that paragraph here. Liberating masculinity is a version of masculinity that releases men from the limiting, damaging, counterproductive bonds of traditional views of manhood. It enables men to embody many archetypal roles, extending beyond the conventional provider and protector roles to others such as healer, artist, lover, and spiritual seeker. A man operating from liberating masculinity also has a broader understanding of how to perform these multiple roles. I
Mm.
thought that was awesome. And then taking it one step further, they talk about liberating, the term liberating, working both inwardly and outwardly. The first is the sense that men are free to live bigger, fuller, more imaginative lives. The
Mm.
second is that this is a masculinity that involves freeing of others. So inwardly, it's liberating for ourselves, and then
Yeah.
outwardly, by living that liberating masculinity, it allows us to free others around us and not judge them. So I thought
Right.
those were key terms that needed to be redefined in this episode, and then gone a little further into depth. So yeah, what are your thoughts, man, on liberating and confined masculinity just as a whole, and then we can get more into a little bit more of the show last week and some of the comments and
Yeah.
questions.
Um, yeah, I feel when you read that, the liberating masculinity, it feels, it just feels liberating. It feels more holistic. It feels more natural in a lot of ways. And then, but it also makes me reflect immediately on confined masculinity and how incredibly restrictive it is, and the emotions that come up with it. In confined men, and I've been that confined man, for probably the first 25 years of my life in a lot of ways, or maybe the first 30 years of my life, and I've been breaking free of that. I'm 48 now. So I understand that person, and that kind of man, and I know the feelings I would typically have would be, that always wanting to be in control. There's always like a subtle undercurrent of shame or something like that, because there's a lot of frustration and anger because I wasn't really able to express myself the way I wanted to, whether it's verbally, whether it's being that artist or being that healer, or embodying some other type of archetype that they say in liberating masculinity. And it's just it's nice to have these terms, but to get into the feeling, that kind of what drives and what actually comes to the surface in the experience of a man who is confined versus someone that's more liberating. A liberating man, it's like they are open to more ideas. That means they're open to more people. They're probably a hell of a lot more less judgmental of other people. That's another thing that can find masculine. So much judgment. It's like you're
Yeah,
always like telling everyone what to do or how they should be, or because you're always trying to be in control. Because if you see somebody else, step out of the conformity, it's like it's jolting. It's like whoa, whoa, whoa. He can't do that because I can't do that.
right,
So
right.
those are some of my thoughts there, John. And I can see how those feelings, and we talked about that shame loop when Ed and Ed were on, how that kind of keeps us in this confined, mental, emotional, and physical state of like that, coming back to that defensive crouch, and the world is always being perceived as a threat, and we must defend ourselves in every single situation, even when 99.9% of the time there is no threat.
Right,
So,
right.
but
Yeah.
what are your thoughts, John?
Well, what I thought was really interesting was, reading the book towards the end. I believe it's Ed Frauenheim speaking in the book, and he talks about, this is a constant. Um, I don't want to call it a battle. I'm going to misquote him, but basically the fact that because we were raised in a certain way, uh, because we were basically raised under confined masculinity, that often we default back to that.
Yeah.
Even though we may have been made aware by reading this book and reading some of the other books that we've read about these other aspects of masculinity that could be confining, could be perceived as toxic, we sometimes default to that. And I found myself
Mhm.
even defaulting to that um, in our episode last week, as some
Wow.
people were making some comments that were somewhat inflammatory. I wanted to jump on there and comment back as this confined man or this toxic man and be like, "Look, mf'er,"
Mm.
and like I wanted to go through the internet and beat them up. But then
Yeah.
by being that way, I was in fact defaulting to the confined masculine aspects of masculinity,
Yeah.
or the toxic aspects of masculinity. Um,
Yeah.
but that's again part of that has is actually been ingrained in me because of how society has brought us up, how our families have brought us up, and I am trying now to be better, but I do have a natural default that I go back to,
Sure.
or it's actually not a natural default, but it's the default that's been ingrained in me.
Yeah, it's
That
early
yeah,
programming, right? It's
yeah,
early,
it's the
early
early programming.
programming from
Yep,
dad, from uncles, from friends and, coaches,
totally.
like this is all like I I really don't know, John, of any situation and culture that I've really been in, except the theater world. I gotta say the theater world, because I was in theater and film for a while, has like more of a expression to it. I think that's why I was drawn to it because I was kind of tired of that confined like there's only like can only be four things or or like
Yeah,
or five different ways of expressing yourself and that's it. God forbid if you don't because you'll be called gay or you'll be called shamed in some way or it's like
right.
crazy. But yeah, I forgot where else is going with that. But
All good, man.
yeah, it's just like
Well,
there's not like there's not a lot of opportunities out there to and it's funny. I know when I have experienced people that instead of like thinking of my basketball days, instead of people yelling at me for doing wrong and like get back in line and why'd you mess up, where actually coaches take the time. It's like, hey, let me show you. Like let me teach you. Those are the coaches that and the people in my life that I wanted to really be around much more because I wasn't feeling shamed. I wasn't feeling like
right,
crap. I was
right.
actually being nurtured as a young man in order to do better and succeed in what I was passionate about.
Yeah, and
So
that comes full circle to our episode 2 weeks ago, leaders versus bosses, bosses versus
yeah,
leaders.
yeah,
Who do you want to work for? You want to work for
yeah,
somebody who is going to be compassionate, empathetic, and caring,
right,
and mentoring, and that those are the aspects that we can find in masculinity. Those are good aspects of masculinity or femininity. Those can be on either side of the spectrum, but that's
yeah,
definitely sides that we need to work more at as men, I believe.
yeah,
Which I do want to I want to highlight. Several of our episodes in the past month have been on aspects of masculinity that may be perceived as negative. I want to make sure
mhm,
we're not, we as men are not perceived as men talking mindfulness, the man bashing show, right? We
yeah,
are. There's definitely great things about masculinity,
yeah,
that we celebrate. And as a matter of fact, in reinventing masculinity, they also talk about the good things that have actually ironically come from confined
mhm,
masculinity, that confined
yeah,
masculinity driving the desire to compete because there's a thought of scarcity or a feeling of scarcity rather than abundance.
mhm,
But
yeah,
that has generated great wealth. It's created these amazing products, created a technology that's enhanced human well-being. It's built, I think the term was built soaring cathedrals, helped send men to the moon. But
right,
then it talked about the fact that it's done all that, has created all these amazing things. But in that, we end up treating life and we end up treating work as a thing. We end up
right,
treating
yeah,
work and life
transactional,
as machines. Yeah, very transactional. Um,
right,
and work. This comes to that Harvard Business Review article that you and I have been talking about this week. But
mm,
it all comes down to work being like a machine and the people in that workspace being like cogs in that machine,
right,
and rather than actual people. And that
right,
actually leads me to another excerpt from the book that I want to read. Let's see, page 5 here.
yeah,
So
I'm with you.
it's on, yeah, it's on confined masculinity in the 21st century, and there's just a couple of spots here. It says confined masculinity no longer works at work. Most companies feature hierarchical structures and impersonal practices that mimic traditional masculine values, but this approach is proving to be incompatible with our increasingly complex, globally integrated economy and with growing attention to the well-being, especially this day and age with the pandemic as it is, the well-being of people and the planet. Get this is crazy. Stressful, toxic workplaces contribute to some 120,000 premature deaths a year. And the average
Wow.
company operates at just a fraction of its potential to innovate and grow. Organizations increasingly expect leaders and other employees to demonstrate traits like empathy, curiosity, and collaboration, which
Mhm.
that obviously is not happening in confined masculinity. There are good
Mhm.
aspects of it, that competition fosters competition, but a lot
Yeah.
of the time, competition is not what you need. You need collaboration, you need empathy,
Right.
and
Right.
that's where confined masculinity is faltering in the workplace, but not only in the workplace, in society writ large. So
Yeah.
I just want to bring that to the attention, and then maybe we could go through what. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, no. I actually wanted to mention, uh, you mentioned a few times over yesterday in our text and today you mentioned this man bashing. It's like, that's not what we're doing at all here. Like,
Right.
I mean, zero. And like, uh, I mean, I think it's like, if we're going to, if you look at the history of humankind, in order to get to another place, things always had to break. Things had to change. We need to deconstruct in order to reconstruct something great. And
Hmm.
I feel like that's where we are with men talking mindfulness and these topics. Is we're just trying to create awareness, and it's very confronting. Like we have a lot of comments uh, of, of hyper and confined men that are very triggered when we talk about shame, when we talk about other aspects of masculinity that are not typically rewarded, like we've been talking about. And if we're going to make some change, like we're going to have to get a little deep, get a little uncomfortable, because that's where it is. It's like in order to change, we must go down and lean into the discomfort, right? Find ourselves there and look for another way out. I think it's really key in their book as well. They talk about a lot of this, and what we're talking about is starts in the imagination, seeing yourself functioning differently, seeing yourself being more compassionate, being more empathetic, letting go of control, stepping back, being a follower instead of a leader, letting go of control, and just taking a moment and just taking in a grander view instead of trying to impress your way of doing things, and it has to be my way or the highway. And,
Right.
and how much continual frustration does that bring up to you into your life in those moments?
Right.
Because it's never going to, what you want, right, is never going to be exactly how it's going to be in the real world. There's a natural requirement of flexibility. It's everywhere. Flexibility. It's in the trees. It's in all the plants. Right. It's in the natural structures that are around us. Is
Right.
flexibility, because anything that's too rigid breaks. And we're breaking this idea of confined masculinity and starting to create something and imagine something, and creating more images in people's minds, and men and women out there, of how we can be. And we're also helping, John, I feel a lot, people understanding like what it takes to be successful. That's really what the prescription is, I feel, of bringing these two types of masculinity up. It's like, if you want to be more successful, and not just more wealthy or make more money, or have more success in your job in some ways, but also more successful in your relationships, to yourself, to other people, to the planet. Like,
Yeah.
that's where this stuff is going to take us. I mean, and it's just
Yeah.
been proven. It's like, how much research do we need to read, or how many experience do you have to have when you just step out of that confined masculinity man box, just for a moment, of how life can be like, wow, I didn't know it could feel like that.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
Oh
like,
man,
yeah,
that makes me think about this one other passage in here, and this I think this may be the last passage that I read from the book, but there's this awesome example. So a lot of people are like, oh,
right.
I'm not confined. I'm not confined. Well, this really interesting round table experiment. So imagine
Yeah.
imagine yourself at a large round table.
Mm.
The provider, protector, and conqueror dimensions of yourself are sitting with you as a personal council of advisors.
Ooh.
Now, let's imagine you want to go on a weekend getaway with your friend or partner. You process this idea through the eyes of your provider and protector. Just think about that for a second. You're
Hmm.
processing this weekend getaway through the eyes of the provider and protector. within seconds, the idea is dismissed. And I could totally imagine this happening at this round table.
Sounds like a
right?
family vacation, John. I'm like, oh my God, back in the day, I'm like, oh shit.
Right.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
Right. So within seconds, the idea is dismissed. You will hear yourself thinking about loss. Your judging and negative internal voices will gladly provide objections centered on time and money and how some work projects are coming due that need your full attention. Goodbye, pleasure trip. That happens all the time to me. That literally happens all the time. Like I'll be like, hey, my beautiful bride, she'll go and do pleasure trips, and they're fun for her. But rarely will she think about the impacts. On the flip side, as soon as I think about a pleasure trip, I'm like, oh, that's going to cost me money. That's going to cost me time where I could be making money. That's going to cost me blah blah blah. I go through all this stuff, and and I instantly talk myself out of the trip. Funny enough, my high school cross country and track coach, he's having the track at my high school dedicated to him, not next Friday, but the following Friday. So some of my friends were like, hey, John, you should come visit. You come for the dedication. And first thing that jumped up into my mind is like, no way. I'm too busy. I've got too much going on. I don't have time. I've got to be here for my family, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know what? I was like, you know what? F it. I'm going to go. Which leads me into the second part of this scenario. Now, I swear, I think this part of this book is actually what convinced me subliminally to take this trip.
I'm sure, John, right? Expanding your mind.
Now reimagine this scenario with an increased number of advisors at the table would be your king, visionary, benevolent warrior, artist, healer, lover, poet, magician, politician, adventurer, shaman, sage, and comic selves. Also present is your little boy, the little boy version of yourself. And let's not forget the shadow parts we all hide from others, like your saboteur and your angry warrior. So you bring in all these other advisors, and the adventurer suddenly starts planning the trip while the benevolent warrior figures out how to afford it. And I swear that right there is what inspired me to want to go on this trip. But it's a really interesting little study, right? Hey, are you confined or not? Go through that little experiment and analyze which way would you have gone? Would you have said, no way am I taking any time off for myself? And who knows, you may come back from that trip recharged and be better at that provider, be better at that protector. And it's just a really interesting, I don't want to call it a case study, but experiment to check whether you are living as a confined man or whether you're liberated. So anyway,
and what I was gonna say, John, like that, like, you know, I keep coming back, or in my mind, I'm like, okay, how do we get men to move, you know, in a more liberating direction? And that what you mentioned can be a fantastic exercise. Take yourself away for a weekend, you know, leave the work at home, forget about the checkbook and all that kind of thing, and do something like it's that. What's helped me, John, become more liberated is taking those moments for self-care. Taking time to step back, to reflect, to go on the inside, to learn more about myself. And when I take myself out of, you know, the way I typically do things or the confined, restricted, masculine norms, and I try something different, a whole new place opens up for myself emotionally, mentally, physically. It just helps me to be to understand how I can be and what it is to be more well-rounded.
Right.
You know, like I think that would be a great, I mean, so I challenge anybody, and please send send us a message when you do so. But why don't you take like 3 days and just go off the beaten path and do something fun for yourself you've always wanted to do? I mean, like, you know, take that trip, go on that hike, like call your buddy and go fishing with them and be like, forget about the business, forget about this. It's like, and John, you brought up a really great point. Every time I take some time away from, you know, what I'm doing in New York and the life that I have, I always come back with, I'm more recharged. I have a new set of eyes. I'm able to see things more clearly, and I treat everyone better.
Right. So, oh yeah, absolutely, including yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's where it all starts, right?
Yeah.
I'm not beating myself up as much. I'm not going to beat everybody else up.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty wild, man. So if you're watching, I encourage you to go through that experiment and see where you are. Love to. We got a comment here. The danger is one might not come back.
Well,
That's true.
maybe
That's
you
true.
shouldn't. Maybe you shouldn't, because if you don't feel like coming back, then maybe you should reevaluate.
True. Yeah. So yeah,
Great point.
man. So let's now that we just caught that comment that just came in, let's go back to some of the comments that we did have come in last week, and
Yeah.
address some of those. And you mentioned some of them were definitely triggered. I don't want to get into the specific comments if they were triggered, but there were definitely some that mention of cream puffs, the fact that navel gazers, weak wristed, so
beta males. Like, I'm just saying, these are the
Yep.
things, like, and let me just jump in with this, John, really
Go
quick.
for it.
It's
Go
like,
for it.
it's like, this is confined masculinity, a confined man, right, who has the opportunity 100% to be more liberating, and to shift into that liberating masculinity. That they're just triggered because it's like, again, it's like, well, if they're like that, then how can I be like that? If somebody else is like that, you got to pull them back. So here we are
Right.
having this conversation, talking about different options and different ways of living, and living more happily and healthily. And I'm not surprised that, but I think it's also interesting, John, that these men are still in this discussion and commenting more than once, because there's the part of them. It's like the confined masculinity is there, but I feel that their heart and their ears are like yearning for something more. We do have this heart. It's almost like another brain of ours. And it's just like, wait, there's something to that. I know it, because there's definitely some truth there. And our heart is always attuned to truth, and it's listening
Right.
and it's listening, but like, and then the confined part is like this war on the inside, and they're just bringing that war right into our feed, or into our comments. And I
Right.
really appreciate them, because this is like that whole idea of us like shifting consciousness here. And that's what I want to help people do with the show. Very much
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that is the point of our show, right?
Right.
It's certainly not to man bash, but it is
No,
to
no, it's
help
not. We're not
people
even doing that. Yeah.
expand their awareness,
Right.
expand their consciousness, and ultimately live happier and healthier, more fulfilling lives, and help those around them live happier and healthier, more fulfilling lives.
Exactly.
So I think that's the key that we want to make sure we highlight. Um,
Yeah.
and then some of the positive comments that we got, we already mentioned the one term, the partial masculinity,
Yeah.
which I think is fantastic. We talk about
Russ just says right here, he goes, Russ in our comments, sorry to cut you off, he goes, I
yeah,
suggest
go for it.
reading Wild at Heart
Oh
by
yeah,
John Eldridge, Discovering the Secret of a Man's Soul. So thank you, Ross, for that in our
yeah,
live right now. Will at
definitely.
Heart. So pick up that book. Maybe someone wants to drop that in the feed here, would be helpful. Put it in the
Yeah.
comment box.
Next
But I'm
time
sorry,
next
John.
time you chat, man. Next time you're talking, I'll try to drop that in the
Okay. Yeah.
comments.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's see. We talked about thanks for sharing. Amazing how many are stuck in their ways and not open to new concepts and or ideas.
Right.
And then the funny part of that comment is, I thought in the military we were taught how to adapt to things. Funny enough,
Right.
we're taught in the military how to adapt to a whole lot of things, but then there's rules, regulations that constrict us, and it also constricts the way we think.
Right.
I think now the military is getting better about being innovative and thinking outside the box. Everybody thinks that the military is the most innovative uh, thing in the world, but I could tell you there's a lot of closed-minded, in the box thinking,
Yeah.
and then talking about in the box, there's a lot of in the man box thinking as well,
Yeah.
which is part of that confined masculinity. Um,
Another thing
yeah,
that came up,
anything
John, during our
for it.
comments is generational in some ways.
Yeah,
I think a lot of that, uh, those confined constructs, because I know my father, I mean, and a lot of my uncles, and a lot, even like the men in my generation back in Pennsylvania, still live very strongly to the confined masculine concepts, like very,
yeah,
very, very, very strongly. And I feel like, talking about innovation in the military, I feel a lot in our society, and that's, I mean, we're a byproduct and kind of on the frontier of trying to change this paradigm. And there's going to be a natural resistance because we're going against an old way of doing things. And as a species, typically, I mean, as a human species, I guess, we're definitely we're less inclined to change because we have this machinery, and one of the biggest pieces of machinery or is habits. And if we're always doing the
Yeah.
same things all the time, right? And it's always been working for us. I'm fed. I have my lights on, right? I'm in a safe place, right? And that could be enough for some people, and that's enough for confined masculinity, men, to just live that kind of life. Just show up, do your duty, shut up, don't cry, and just go back to work on Monday. And
Yep.
it's just like, whoa. Like, so I feel there's also, it's what we're running up against, or that the new is coming in, and it's pressing up against the old way of doing things. And we're having this turmoil in the middle, and that, honestly, John, we are really trying to sort out, creating
Right.
this space for people to just show up as you are. Please make your comments. I love hearing this cream puffs and limp wristed, that kind of stuff. I really do, because it gives me, because I get to know where you are, those people that make those kinds of comments. And then we can do the work, we can read more books, bring more guests on, so we can help you just take that one step, that one little vacation, in order to
Right.
get out of that box and be like, whoa, there is a whole nother world out here. So
Yeah, man. And one of the things you said there is that, people think, hey, we've always been this way. This is the way it's worked for years. This is the way it's
right,
worked for eons. This is the way it's worked for all of humanity since we've been around. And
right.
another thing that's really interesting in the book, and in another book I've read, Guns, Germs, and Steel, talking about how we went from being hunter gatherers to
Mm,
becoming agricultural societies. And once agriculture started, that's when we started building communities. That's when we started building cities. That's when a lot of things changed. And specifically in the book, it talks about hunter-gatherer societies. They were more social. They were more
yeah.
caring. There was less competition. Everybody
Mm,
contributed to the provider. So men and women equally were providers.
mhm,
Men and women equally were protectors. And then
mhm.
and then when agriculture came about, and I think specifically they talk about the animal pulled plow, and I probably used the wrong term there because I'm not a farmer. But the fact that the plow would could cause miscarriages among pregnant women. So at
Oh,
that
yeah,
time,
of course.
when the plow came about,
Mm,
men started plowing the fields. Women started cooking the food and started being more domesticated, and that's where a lot of things changed. I mean, and not just female versus male, feminine versus
yeah.
masculine. I don't want to say versus. I did use versus, but I just
Mm,
misuse of term there. But anyhow, the society writ large changed. Another fascinating read is Guns, Germs, and Steel, and how things,
good.
depending on where you live geographically in the world, when the hunter gatherers stopped being hunter gatherers, the
Mm,
agriculture was more advanced, and because agriculture was more advanced in certain areas, certain latitudes and longitudes, those societies advanced faster, and the way that they advanced changed things. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked, but
yeah.
bottom line is we have not always been this way. We have not
No.
always been this way, and we were
Mhm,
successful as societies as prior to the new, relatively new roles of men and women in the world. We were
mhm.
successful. We were caring. We were not as competitive. So
Right.
just an interesting way of looking at things from another perspective. We have not
Well,
always
it's
been
like
this way.
we domesticated animals, and then we started domesticate women, or something like that. Is
Oh,
seeming like,
wow.
is kind of
Yeah.
like, I mean, I'm just saying, it's like now we have all our roles, because like, we at that time in our history, like, we were just trying to survive, and then we found a way to survive.
Right.
Agricultural crops, and water, in order to water those crops, and then animals as well, and then life just got easier, like a little bit easier. So then we started getting stupid, I guess, or it's like, in a sense of, uh, you know, and this kind of segues. Another thing I want to talk about is just like alpha and beta male. Like, people are
Yeah.
making comments about beta males. It's like, it's we need both. I feel like a yin and yang, or I think what I'll
Yeah.
say is a liberating man. Yin and yang is between beta and male and alpha, because you have to, like, if you want to be a great leader, you should be a wonderful follower. Like, that's like, they
Yeah.
talk about that in Confucianism. If you want to be a great leader, learn how to be an incredible follower. And if it wasn't for like the men that are considered beta men, we wouldn't have electricity, we wouldn't have the internet, we wouldn't have the telephone, we wouldn't have like Google, we wouldn't have the iPhone. We wouldn't, because these are men that are considered geeks, right? Not
Right.
strong, don't have this physical prowess. But like, I mean, we wouldn't be communicating right now if it wasn't for some, or what men might, or some other men might consider
True.
like beta males right now, because like, that's not my skills, but
Right.
it's
And
somebody
I mean, we
else's, and I
need
can
both.
respect
Like you
that.
said, we need both.
Exactly.
Like,
Yep.
sure, we may not have a lot of this technology if it weren't for the beta male or the beta person. It's not just a male, but
Yeah. True.
beta dog. Let's say the beta dog,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But at the same time, like, I'm looking out the window here and I see these streets that are paved and the buildings that are built, and a lot of those were probably built by alpha males. And I'm
Right.
thankful for it. I'm thankful that I'm sitting in a building
Yeah, like, there's
that
like
is
guys in my
heated.
street right now putting a
Yeah,
water main. Like, they're
right.
like backhoes, trucks, sand,
Yeah,
like
and
boards and stuff. Yeah.
there's nothing against that. I have nothing
No.
against either side. I mean, hell, I consider myself an alpha male.
Yeah.
I'm thankful
Me
for the
too.
beta males, and
Yeah.
I'm also thankful for my other alpha males. But you're
Yeah.
right. There it is, that yin and yang, where I think we need both, and we can work together. Which actually brings me to the real crux of reinventing masculinity, are the
Mm.
5 C's, and we went through this
Oh yeah.
last week. But
Yeah.
I want to rehash it for those who may not have listened last week, may not have tuned in last week. But the
Yeah.
5 C's and why they're so important. 5 C's are curiosity. Curiosity is asking questions and wondering, especially about
Mhm.
whether there's more to life, and if there's a better way than the traditional combined man rules allow. The next
Yeah.
C is courage. Courage is
Mhm.
challenging the subjective fears and social constraints that prevent us from expressing our multiple dimensions as men, not just the provider and protector.
Right.
Compassion is the next C. So number 3, compassion is opening
Mhm.
ourselves to suffering and disappointment within ourselves and others. Next
Mhm.
one is connection. And this one I think is where men struggle a lot. This one and
Yeah.
compassion both,
Yeah.
is noticing the interdependence of living systems and cultivating healthier bonds with people and the planet. And another book that right now, Connection, it's highlighting to me. Another book that I'm reading right now is The One Thing.
Oh
I'm
yeah, I've read
rereading it.
that book.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
phenomenal. But something
Right.
that jumps out at me is nobody has ever been successful on their own. Nobody has
No.
ever been successful on their own. There's
Yeah.
always been a mentor, there's been a fellow leader or somebody
Yeah.
that you can lean on. Connection
Yeah.
is incredibly important to being successful. So that's key. And then commitment. Commitment is persisting in the work to expand gender roles in favor of a liberating, powerful masculinity that works for all. Works for all. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's the important piece, is that a lot of the comments that came in last week or on some of our past episodes that were about the other side of things. Hey, some of them were great, but some of them were inflammatory. And if you look
Yeah.
at the way that they said things, it does not work for all. And that's where the liberating
Right.
masculinity, it's liberating internally for each individual man, but it's also liberating externally for society as a whole. And I think that's the important aspect,
Yeah.
that
Very much so.
a lot of people miss. So those are the 5 C's: curiosity, courage, compassion, connection, and commitment. So
I I think it's like, and like these comments we keep coming back to, John, like the inflammatory ones, like, I'm compassionate about them too. Because like,
yeah,
literally, like, I know that man, because I was that man, and I have very close men to me that are still like that. And I'm like,
right,
okay, great. So what do we do? And this is what the 5 C's are all about. The 5 C's are the is the bridge between confined
yeah,
masculinity, taking that walk, right, into liberating masculinity. And it can start very small and very simple. We talked about that little, self-care vacation, if you want, but just even like, and it could be connection. You mentioned, John, and they talked about, we talked about this last Friday with Ed and Ed here, is hard for men to just kind of reach out and call an old friend. This is, we had a comment. It's like the fear of vulnerability still stuck from the past to admit that we need friends was a comment from last week. The vulnerability to be like, oh, I would just like to have a friend, or I should really call that person. And how does that continually get in the way? And maybe a step like that, calling somebody you haven't talked to in a year or 2 or 3 years or something like that, it might be a little bit too much for you. But that doesn't mean that you can't get curious, right? And maybe read the book, right? And I'm not like plugging the book. I mean, or it's like,
I'll plug it. I'll plug it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a great read.
I know, right? We are plugging
and what's
the book,
funny,
right?
and we are plugging it. And what's funny is what I did really appreciate was some of the comments last week, both on this show and some of our posts in regards to this show. There were some people that commented, but then they were open to it. I was like, hey, give the book a read. And some of them ordered it. And some of them were like, hey, this is mind-blowing stuff. And that's where you need to be, that curiosity and having the courage to expand your awareness. And I love that. That was one aspect of the conversations and the comments that were like, was positive.
John, it's like, are you brave enough to read the book? Like, are you man enough to read this book?
Right.
Which isn't going to battle you. It's not going to hurt you. It's just a bunch of paper. You know what I mean? Some words on it. Like, are you man enough to read the book? I mean, I hate to be like, oh, I'm getting all toxic or right now, calling men out for this. But it's like, but literally, it's like, what does it hurt to read? You know what? Also, and it's on our site. Ed and Ed offered the first chapter for free. For free. You go to mentalkingmindfulness.com/resources, right? And I have it on the bottom of the page there. And you can read the first chapter for absolutely free. No commitment, no obligation. And then let us know what you think about it. So it's like, that could be that step of curiosity, John, that starts to a whole cascade of events. You begin to walk across that bridge and understand and begin to feel the incredible power and peacefulness in liberating masculinity. It's there. It's there. Like, this is a guide. I'm getting really passionate right now, John. I don't know what's going on.
I love it, man. You're getting fired up.
I am getting fired up, right? So, so we have it at the top of the page. Lindsay's here helping us out.
I see that. Right on.
It's right there now as well. But read this book, or we're going to have Tony on in a couple weeks, talking about the man box. Which is a whole nother. We're going to talk about women and violence against women and objectification of women when he comes on. Yeah, there's
Tony Porter.
There he is, man. This guy is bomb.
Yeah,
I love this guy.
It is another
TED Talk.
Fantastic TED Talk. It is another completely different angle of masculinity. It's not so much the toxic masculinity, but it is living in that man box that we've covered before. And very excited to have him on the show. Great read, short, easy read, breaking out of the man box right there. Tony Porter.
It's a little uncomfortable, John. Sometimes I'm like, oh my god.
Oh, dude,
that's me.
Like, some of the comments,
me. It's like,
and situations like he is very open and vulnerable about it, and it's man, and his story of him growing up and seeing certain things. I won't spoil the book one, and I won't spoil our show two. But if you get a chance, get that book, read it, and start living by it, because it's pretty powerful. But we're starting to come to the end of the show here, brother. Any last comments or questions that we want to address here from the live audience? Let's see.
We've had
average lifespan shorter than yep, that's true. Talking about when we're hunter-gatherers, absolutely. We've definitely expanded or lengthened our lifespan since then, no doubt. And I keep looking out the window here because I'm working at this co-working space, and apparently I'm the only one here now. And
it's all good. I'm sorry, Fred brings up a comment here because I have to consciously, and this is thank you for this, Fred, because I have to consciously integrate liberating masculinity into the workplace. I'm embarrassed that I brought a toxic into an interaction with one of my many coworkers. So I guess he's brought a toxic man in. So but Fred, just even you being aware, you being a part of this conversation, things are going to change, right? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
and what I suggest also, bring people into the show, guys. Have them go back and listen to Liz. The 3 episodes we did on For the Love of Men. The 2 episodes that we have here with Reinventing Masculinity. Also understanding boss versus leader. We have a whole what about aggression and dominance. We have a whole episode on that. We have another one with compassion, empathy, and sympathy. So it's like this is an opportunity, guys, and John and I are kind of leading the charge in some ways, but we can't do this alone. Like we invite men in, we invite women in, we invite all people, all human beings into this conversation because it needs to be had. And yes, and I'm glad it's making you uncomfortable, not you, John. I know it's making you uncomfortable too, but
It does.
yeah,
It does a
yeah,
little bit.
it
But
does
it's
for me
good. It's
too.
good. Right?
It's good because like that's how
Yeah.
things change when we
Right.
begin to look and get introspective and also like extrospective in the sense of like looking outside and be like, whoa, that doesn't work. I mean, this Fred's comment right here is he's
Right.
understanding it's like, whoa, there's like a hyper masculine, toxic, or confined, whatever you want to call them, a partial masculine. It's like, okay, then what do you do with that person? That's a great question. Take him to lunch and I don't know, have a conversation with him and listen to the podcast. But like we're trying to define that as well, like steps to do that. And the fact that you're here and all of you are here and just being curious is where it starts, is where it all starts with just being curious. And then
Yeah.
finding that courage, which is finding your heart essentially. So thanks, John. This is like
Yeah, man.
every week, there's just so much beauty coming up and beauty because it's uncomfortable, John. Like I'm a little afraid for Tony to come on. He's like, but the objectification of women, I was like, oh God, that's gonna
Yeah.
be that's
Well,
gonna
it's
be something.
powerful, man. Like I'm soon to have 2 daughters. Got one, another one on the
Yeah,
way. Obviously married to my wife, who I very much love. Got 3 older sisters, and my mom. A
right.
lot of women in my life, just in my
Yeah,
family, and then I've got
yeah,
a lot of women friends, colleagues, coworkers, and um, I am much like Tony in that at one time in my life when I was younger and dumber for sure.
yeah,
There,
yeah.
there
Or just
was there was
ignorant, right?
ignorant. There was definitely an objectification that was happening, and for that I'm eternally sorry. But luckily, I've grown from that, and
Yeah,
I'm a better man, for a better husband, better father, better son, better brother, um, better friend.
better
So
co-host. Yeah.
better co-host. Yeah. So all right, brother, man. I got
Yeah.
27 past. We're gonna wrap it
Yeah,
up
no,
with a
it's all
grounding
good.
practice.
Yeah, great, great, great. So good. Again, find that seat, or if you're sitting down, or if you're walking, wherever you're doing at this point, you can always just make contact, interlace your fingers, and maybe put your hand on your chest, or just bring a hand on your belly. And let's start with a nice little exhale out the mouth. Eyes can be closed, or if you're in an active environment, eyes can be open, but you can still breathe. Take a big breath into the nose and exhale out the mouth. Again, inhale really big, bigger, bigger balloon breath in your whole torso. Exhale out. Good. And 2 more. Big breath. Exhale. 1 more. Big breath. Excellent. Let it go. Just take a moment using your imagination and just one thing that can help you take that first step on the bridge to liberating masculinity. One thing you can do. One simple, simple thing. And this goes, I mean, for the women out there listening, one thing that you can do for yourself if you feel confined in some ways, or another way that you can maybe help another man create a space for them to take that first step. Stay with your breath, to yourself, courageously taking that first step. Maybe take a moment after the show and write that down, or like take a moment to journal, or you know what, share it with a friend of yours, or a really good friend of yours, and say like, hey, I need help. One breath to close. Let's start with an exhale. Empty completely out. Feel that emptiness hit the bottom. Take a big giant inhale. More, more, more. And exhale it out. Awesome, awesome. Great. Open your eyes when you're ready. John, thank you again.
Yeah, man.
Wonderful.
Thank you, brother. And for listeners, we've got to wrap it up. But when you're listening to the podcast, or if you're watching the show, check it out on podcast format. Give us a like, give us a review, give us a rating. We'd appreciate that. That helps us to get the word out. But yeah, Will, thanks for the show. Thanks for the time. And I love you, brother. And I'm comfortable saying that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm comfortable hearing that, John. Thank you so much. This is a great way to end the show, John. I appreciate that. I love you too.
And, all right, man. Talk to you next week.
Yeah. Okay. Got you next week. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for joining Will and John on Men Talking Mindfulness. If you enjoyed the show, please like and share it with your friends and family, and please, we would appreciate a review too. Until next time, this has been Men Talking Mindfulness. Thanks for showing up.